Consider the Lillies is a novel of two halves. The turning point is Mrs. Scott's visit to the minister. It's a simple walk to the manse through the countryside, but it's also a journey of discovery. Why is this visit so significant? Why should we view it as a turning point in the novel? This isn't the passive Mrs. Scott of earlier scenes, the listener. No, she has actively sought out the minister for advice, for his counsel. She has turned to the one person she believes she can trust, to help her resist the man on the white horse who threatens her home, one who can speak for God. This won't have been an easy decision.
Have you ever thought, Mrs. Scott, that the people of this village have deserved this? That this came as a punishment for their sins? I have served many years here as a servant of God's servants. And I could tell you of practices that as a daughter of God you would not believe. Carnality, Mrs. Scott. And of music that is not the music of David, of some who do not attend church at all, thinking of the flesh and of their worldly pleasures. Do you know that when the Duke invited them to join his regiment, to fight for their lawful king and country, not one of them volunteered? Not that that is the important matter. What is important is the attitude it shows. Where one is not loyal to one's earthly masters, one is not likely to be loyal to one's God. Did not the Lord himself say we must be loyal to our earthly masters? It is their land, Mrs. Scott, and the law is on their side.
Does the minister think they're right to put me out?
Mrs. Scott, we are all going to be put out. I myself am going to be put out. I shall have to leave this manse, which I have loved, this church, which I have built with my own hands. Do you not think I will miss them, Mrs. Scott? Though I have had to suffer much obduracy. Mrs. Scott, I had a long talk with Mr. Seller. He struck me as a reasonable man, a man who must carry out his orders, albeit a man who will show humanity to the weak. As I say, I had a long talk with him. He promised us all houses, better houses than we have at present. And he spoke of a place where you would all have a second chance. A chance to begin again. A second chance, Mrs. Scott. How few of us in this world are given a second chance.
During this interview with the minister, we see Mrs. Scott changing. At first, she's her usual hesitant, almost confused self. But then...
The minister's got it wrong. That Mr. Seller was anything but reasonable in his dealings with me. My husband, he volunteered to fight for king and country. And the minister... He certainly did not build our church with his own hands. He wasn't telling the truth here, and him a minister. Maybe if Ian was here to support me in this, things would be different. Who have I got to turn to? There's nobody.
It's what happens next that divides the novel. From the moment Mrs. Scott, fleeing the manse, falls into the water, we see a new and different tone to consider the Lillies. There's only one more visit to her past, Ian's departure to Canada on board the Hope. The structure changes. By abandoning the flashbacks, the author makes his character come to terms with her present situation. The church, and the people who represent it, have failed her. Mrs. Scott needs to find a new truth. Wealthy landlords and their factors, men who place profit before people, are almost too easy a target. So is the minister, with his sense of his own worth. He is held up to ridicule. But is the Christian faith itself being mocked? There are many scriptural references, from the very title to echoes of Bible stories. But is Crichton Smith attacking religion? It's the parable of the Good Samaritan. Mrs. Scott is in trouble, desperate for help. Her elder passes her by. So does the minister. They don't want to know. But it is Donald MacLeod, who's supposed to be an atheist, who Mrs. Scott doesn't even like, who takes her in and looks after her until she is well. Her falling in the river is a form of baptism. She emerges a different person, not as frightened as she was. She seems to be more open, more hopeful. She takes to Donald MacLeod and his wife and children. A new life then. Right at the heart of the novel, the dead sheep is a striking image. What does the sheep represent? The people in Mrs. Scott's church could be seen as a flock of sheep who follow religion mindlessly. What about the crow? Black crow, black robes. The minister in his proud black robes, a symbol of the Calvinist church in Scotland. The crow plucked out the eyes of the sheep. Did the church blind its followers to the truth? What about the sheep as a symbol of Christ, the Lamb of God, the Christ who suffered death so that those who follow him should have everlasting life? The head twisted on its neck at an unnatural angle, the legs twisted under it, the gash in its side. Mrs. Scott has come unaware upon Christ, the fall in the river, a kind of baptism. She is reborn, cleansed of her sins. Even the 3 days spent recovering at the MacLeod household. Christ conquering death. She has promise of a new life. No, Crichton Smith is not attacking the Christian religion or faith. Mrs. Scott is moving from an Old Testament faith, the commandments, a God who judges and punishes hell and damnation, to a New Testament faith, Christ, the Gospels, love and forgiveness. The Bible which crushed her mother's bridal gown has been lifted. In the second part of the novel, Mrs. Scott realises that compassion and charity are more important than laws and punishment. In the past, the flashbacks prove this. Her beliefs seem to repress human feelings. Instead of valuing Ian's free spirit, she condemned his actions. He was sinful, indulgent, proud. Now she seems to appreciate that she was responsible for what happened. The letter to Ian confirms this.
I am closing now with all my love to you, my beloved son, your loving mother, and write soon.
No talk of God. Instead, love gets a mention. She has been born again, starting over in her search for spiritual truth. Not duty, not service, not a life to be endured. She begins again, not knowing what will happen.